Hello everyone, it's History Boy, and recently I joined up with a Civil War reenacting unit, and I just went to my first event. When I arrived at the event, I was helped by a man in the 14th Connecticut to find my unit's tents. I am now in the 8th Connecticut Volunteers and will be their drummer. I soon received my drum and began to practice. We were soon told to form up, and told that a battle was about to begin.
The flag of our country is floating on high. We'll stand by that flag till we conquer or die. Our cause is the right one, our foes in the wrong. Then gladly we'll sing as we're marching along. Marching along, we are marching along. Gird on the armor and be marching along.
As a special thank you for 3,000 subscribers, today I will be telling the story of my first ever Civil War reenactment event with the 8th Connecticut Volunteers. Our objective on this day was to capture this Confederate fort. It would have been taking place on the weeks leading up to the Battle of Petersburg. Even though we outnumbered the Confederates, they had very good fortifications, so it would be a hard fight. We were told by our officers that we would advance after a signal was fired, 3 cannon shots. So we waited. And then, suddenly, we began to advance quickly. We came into contact with some of the rebel skirmishers, and they began to fire cannons at us as well. Fast forward about 10 minutes. The rebel skirmishers had retreated, and our men had successfully maneuvered around the hill. Now the attack on the fort could really begin. Our skirmishers began to deploy and broke off from the main force. As the skirmishers deployed, cannons rang off, and our men began to fire sporadically. Now, our main force, which I was part of, began to march up the hill. Our men now halted and let the skirmishers advance out further. We provided support and covering fire for the skirmishers. Now we advanced with the skirmishers and continued moving up on the Confederates' left flank. At this point, though you cannot see it, multiple of our men had become casualties. Now we reached this wooden fence and began to fire at close distance at the Confederates. Our officers gave us the order to push the fence over, and we moved up. At this point, the fort was partially overrun by our skirmishers, and the Confederates had fully pulled out, except for 2 signal corpsmen, who were still flying the Confederate flag over the fort. Our officer ordered our signalmen to go up and plant our colors on the fort, and they did. They began fighting with the Confederate signalman, who had eventually knocked him out. Now, if you could, focus your attention down on our main Union force. You can see me, the drummer, with my drum. Watch closely. As the Confederates fire another volley, I was hit in the shoulder. Thankfully, I was picked up by the stretcher bearers. Otherwise, I might have bled out on the battlefield and died. My friend Matt then took my drum and my drumsticks, and I was carried off of the field to the hospital tent.
Unfortunately, this poor young man will have to lose his arm, but we know that if we take the arm within 24 hours of the injury, he is almost twice as likely to survive. Bring him over.
Oh, here he comes.
And what I will do is talk you through the surgery step by step so that when you're back with your own companies and regiments, you can reproduce this particular procedure.
Take yourself on.
This is called circular amputation. It is the most simplistic form of amputation that we know nowadays, but it is the quickest, which is an important attribute. There we go. All right, so can we medicate him? Thank you. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, because he's obviously in a lot of pain, is to give him chloroform. We do have two options here. We could use ether. However, generally we're using oil lamps, and ether is very flammable, which makes for a bad situation. So instead we're going to use chloroform. We have to give him enough that he falls asleep, but not so much that he can't breathe, because he does have to breathe on his own or he'll suffocate. This is a fine science. What you can see here is an example of gangrene. This specifically is an example of hospital gangrene. This would be moving a ½ an inch an hour. So, first step.
He's out.
All right.
Ready.
So first step is going to be to remove the soft parts, starting with the flesh. So we go ahead, and you're going to go above the injury, but lower than the joint. You want to think about what kind of stump you're creating here, okay? So you're going to go in. And you're going to sever the flesh. Alright, so that done.
Take a listen.
You're going to go ahead and you're going to remove the fascia underneath, because there will be a lot of connective tissue in there, and we don't necessarily want all of that getting in our way. Scalpel is the best choice for this. A Catlin knife is the best choice for the larger cuts. Alright, so you're going to go around, cutting through, loosening it up, and then you'll peel it back just like a shirt sleeve. Exposing the muscle underneath. So taking your scalpel again, you're going to go ahead and remove as much of this muscular tissue as you can. You want to leave some for the stump, however, but you need to expose the bone as you're going so that we can saw it, and we need to do so as thoroughly as possible, because we also need to visualize the ligaments, the tendons, the vessels, and the nerves. So you just go in and you cut away. See the bone very clearly. Cut the vessel. We'll deal with that next. vessels and our ligaments and our tendons. We do a clear visualization of the bone. We go ahead and saw the bone.
More. It's make believe.
All right.
That's okay. It's make believe.
So you've got the excess limb. Put it with the pile. So now we've got a bone surface that we need smoother than it is. Right now it's like a piece of rough cut wood. You wouldn't leave a piece of wood like that. You're certainly not going to leave a stump like that. We can use our bone pliers and our bone file to clean up those edges. So you go ahead and you nip it around the edges, giving it a bit of a bevel, and then you'd file it down. The saw did a pretty good job. I'm not going to go ahead and sit here and do that in front of you, but that is how you'd smooth out that edge. Otherwise, if you don't, you will get bone protruding through the stump. So at this point, with our vessels in place, we're going to go ahead and pull the skin back down that we had retracted earlier. We've got a good looking stump. We can go ahead and let me move my tools. And we will wake him up. There is a specific process to waking him up. We will rock him back and forth, and that stimulates movement in the lungs and the diaphragm, which helps him breathe. And we need to stimulate the breathing. Okay. So, any questions? Any volunteers?
How long before he dies?
Well, actually, we got him within 24 hours of the injury, which means he's a much higher survival rate. At this point, his chances are about 80% of survival.
I now returned to camp and ate dinner with my friends. I ate a wonderful beef stew and bread that had been cooking since 10 o'clock in the morning. It was truly one of the best meals that I have ever had. I lingered for a while after we were done with the battle, and after I ate dinner, and talked with the men from the 8th and the 14th Connecticut. But soon it was time to leave. I bid my new friends farewell and went back to my 21st century reality. There were about 100 reenactors in the Thompson, Connecticut event. I will truly never forget my first Civil War reenactment. I just wanted to thank you all once again for 3,000 subscribers, and make sure to check and see if there are any reenactment groups in your area, because this has really been one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Make sure to also check out the 8th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry if you live in the greater Connecticut area. Thank you very much, and have a historic day. I'll see you next time.